On today's episode of the Millionaires Lawyer, I'm thrilled to have Poirier on with us. We've been trying to schedule this for some time now, so I'm glad we finally got it arranged. Poirier's been all over the place. He's a multiple-time TEDx speaker and the host of his own or three top-rated interview shows. He's a founder of the Speaker program and has been featured in multiple television specials all over the world. He's a columnist for Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, and he's also interviewed over 5,000 of the world's top leaders while building his own multiple six-figure business. I'm going to do that all again if that's okay.
Yeah. Go hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Bro. It's like getting me.
No, it's a lot anyway, so that's all good.
Yeah. As soon as you hear me. Yeah. Okay. I'll try one more time. If I don't do it, I'll just get it at the end. On today's show of the Millionaires Lawyer, I'm thrilled to have Poirier on with us. We've been trying to schedule this for a while, so it's nice to get us together here now. Both very busy people, I know. Corey himself is a multiple-time TEDx speaker and the host of three top-rated interview shows himself. He's founder of the Speaker program, and he's been featured in multiple television specials. He's a columnist with Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine, and he's interviewed over 5,000 of the world's top leaders. We'll get into that. And finally, he's now working on the Blue Talks Live, the newly launched Blue Talks Live. We'll talk about all that. How are you doing today, Corey?
I am doing fantastic, JP. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks. So they say it's been a while. We've been trying to schedule this. I think I canceled on you once. I think you were traveling another time. So it's nice to finally get us arranged to make this podcast magic happen, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I'm always saying, let's make the magic happen. So I love that you just said that. That's a synergy right there.
There you go, right? And so, I mean, you've been quite accomplished podcaster on your own right and doing quite a bit on the TEDx side of things as well. Talk to me about some of the things that you've done with TEDx and why that's been a real platform for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to say I don't want to say it's been the platform, but it's close. I could say it's been one of the platforms for sure. Yeah. And when I say that, what I mean is that what I've discovered, admittedly, is there's very few platforms from a prestige point of view and a credibility point of view at present. It could change, but at present that match TEDx. And so I'll back that up with this, and then I'll tell you how I've leveraged it and also how I've worked with it. But in terms of the proof of that is whenever I get introduced as a speaker, when the person introducing me says, and he's a multiple-time TEDx speaker, that's the moment that the audience turns and looks at me.
Yeah.
So they could be sitting there kind of doodling. They might even be typing on their phone, and that pulls their attention. So that tells you something. They hear that. So it's almost like an actor when you hear Academy Award winner. You turn your head. And some people, like with the Academy Awards, they may not even follow the Academy Awards or maybe not even like the system, but still turn their head and go, Academy Award winner? And so it has a big cachet. Now, I say it's one of the probably because being a best-selling author is another one. As soon as you can add New York Times best-selling author, that probably puts it in the same level or higher. But truthfully, JP, there's few that can do that. So it is one of the platforms for sure. In terms of what it's done for me is I can actually demonstrate, meaning I can track back with my third TEDx talk, which by the way has the least amount of views, and I can track back roughly 100 bookings, speaking engagements, paid speaking engagements from that one video. And so there's a catch-22 there though, because then people are like, wow, you had that many people reach out that said, hey, I saw your video and we want to hire you. That's not the case. So when I say I can track it, it's because when, let's say I have a person that I have hired that reaches out for bookings for me, whenever she sends the stuff, they say, either to me or her, we watched the TEDx talk and we loved it and we agree that we should bring them in. So what I'm getting at is it's not that they found it on their own, it's that we directed them to it. And it has the least amount of views because it's the one where I got busy and didn't do anything with it. And you have to be a little bit active in this stuff. But the point is just by sending people there builds an instant credibility. And by the way, even if they don't watch it, even if they see the link and say, here's my 3 TEDx talks, it adds credibility. So, that's, I guess, to back up the credibility. And, from my end, what I did was basically I secured the first one. I started seeing the rumblings of people saying, you did a TEDx talk? You're a TEDx speaker? And then I basically used the same, they don't like me saying system. Like nobody likes saying if there's a system to it. So I'll just say I used a similar strategy that I leveraged to land the first one to land the next 2. And in each case, I noticed the difference. Now all of a sudden when you can say 3 times, that even is more credible than saying a multiple time or 2 times. So yeah, so I played with it, but really I figured out how to land them because I saw how powerful it was.
Yeah, it's the credibility, as you say. It establishes 3 times. It does. It's notable. People recognize TEDx speakers, and they've done it multiple times, as you say. It adds credibility. It adds to some confidence for anybody that's dealing with you to know that, hey, he knows what he's doing. He's been through this before. And I guess that probably feeds its way into the speaker program, right? What have you done with the speaker program?
Yeah, so what has happened, the backstory to it is that I've been speaking as a paid speaker on a weekly basis for 18 years now and thought that was normal. Come to find out it's not normal at all.
Not normal at all, no.
Yeah, I didn't know this, but Lisa Nichols, we had her on the show one time. She's, a 7-figure speaker, and her company did a study, and they discovered that I'm going by memory now on it, but the numbers were something like less than 15% earn any level of income from speaking. Sorry, I'll correct that. These are people that are listed as speakers somewhere, that it's like 15%, less than 15% earn any real level of income. Only 5% earn 6 figures, and then only 1% earn 7 figures. But yeah, think, JP, how many speakers you see on social media that it says international sought after speaker. And what I would make the argument is a lot of those international sought after speakers are probably not getting paid for those talks, or if they are, it's probably 1 in 5 or 1 in 8 or 1 in 10. So what happened was about 5 years ago, still not realizing this was wasn't the norm, because even though I knew other speakers, nobody's going to usually say that to you. I'm not getting paid. But what happened was I think people were getting fed up that they weren't getting paid and started reaching out to me because they knew me at that point well enough to say, how are you doing this? I see you're posting 3 times a day sometimes. And, I've heard you say that you don't do any no-fee talks. So you're obviously getting paid. How are you doing this? And my record, by the way, is 7 talks in one day.
Wow.
And I can tell you how that's possible, because the numbers don't work, but I can tell you how that's possible. If we dive into that, what I will tell you is part of it was because they were short talks, and 4 of the 7 were lined up with one company. So it's just like going from their 4 different offices. But still, 7 paid talks in a day is the record. And I'm talking to people who say they don't have 7 in a year, and they're trying. So what happened is I kept answering the same questions over and over. And then I started realizing, I need to be listening to this. You need to listen to your clients. They're the ones that tell you if there's a market for this. And so I recognized there was a market, and I launched the speaking program. That was 5 years ago. And then about a year and a bit ago, people started noticing that this guy's landed 3 TEDx talks in a short amount of time. Can you teach us how to land a branded talk? About a year and a half ago, we launched that program. And more recently, we kind of merged the two because I started realizing how many overlaps there were. But to answer your question, what we've been doing with that is helping people find paid bookings, helping people, and this is a big one, build their credibility up to get those paid bookings, because that's a big part of it. Yeah. So when people come into our program, we're probably shifting that soon, but guarantees a feature interview spot on our show. We have, as you said, 3. So 2 of our shows we can feature them on, featured page in our best-selling book, The Book of Public Speaking. And so what that does is immediately, as soon as you come on board, as long as you're active and provide those things to us, all of a sudden you now have as seen on or as featured on 3 things from day one. So it's about helping them build the credibility up and their branding up, helping them land the paid bookings, and me sharing the secrets for how do I do that. And then maybe they want to go to the next level and land their branded talk. And by the way, I'll add in one of the things I'm most proud of is 2019. We just tracked this recently. We're averaging a student of ours landing their TEDx talk every 3 weeks. And from a branding talk perspective, we had, I think the number was 48 of our speakers delivered a branded talk last year, like this year. So that's like 1 a week.
Yeah, so really, you're getting to 1 a week. Yeah, that should be really proud of that. I mean, you're getting some traction, or obviously the methods you've developed are working, right? Are working in practice, and people can see that, and obviously that brings other people on board as well that seek and achieve the same level of success, don't they?
Well, absolutely. And I guess the big thing too, and why that's important to me, because I don't think of it as a vanity metrics, like the idea of landing whatever it is, a Blue Talk, a TEDx Talk, a Mo Mondays, Goalcast, video or what have you. I don't want to see it as my students of a vanity thing. If I've always wanted to be a TEDx speaker, what I see it as is it's immediately the jump off leveraging point to you now either getting more business within your business or getting more bookings, whether you want to be a paid speaker or not, just getting more bookings. And, to put it in perspective, JP, if you think about it, I mean, I haven't done this yet, but I even see the value of putting together a program of branded talks for entrepreneurs. So you might never want to get paid, but you want to leverage it for your business. And think about it this way. If you were a plumber, I'll just use a random example. If you owned a plumbing outfit and you go work with a person, then you start talking to them like your client, and they recognize you and say, didn't I see you have a TEDx talk on plumbing? My question is, if you have the plumber at your home that's done the TEDx talk versus the plumber that hasn't, who do you think they're going to talk about more? And who can charge more? I'm
Yeah,
the
it's a differentiation. That's right. If nothing else, it differentiates. It establishes some market distinction, right? And it can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why I referenced the plumber is one of the people that we've interviewed in the past, and his name is Richard St. John. He wrote a book called Eight to Be Great, and he has 2 TED Talks, both on the TED main stage. Combined, if you add all the views of all the different places his video's been shared, I think it's over 18 million
Wow.
views.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts him in like the top, obviously top 1%, but I think in the top like 50 most viewed TED speakers, something like that. And Richard was telling me that one day his plumber was over and quizzing him on how to land a TEDx talk. He said, even my plumber wants to do a TED talk. So
Yeah.
anyway, to that point, that, A, that's why there's still credibility with it. And B, if even your plumber wants to do a TED talk, then a lot of people, when they hear that somebody's done one, they're going to want to go to that one. It's just like, do you want to go to the lawyer who wrote the book, or the lawyer who didn't, right? Or the lawyer has the podcast and the lawyer who doesn't. Most people will pay a bit more to say, my lawyer wrote the book on it.
Yeah, to be the expert, the go-to, right? So these are ways of distinguishing yourself or establishing that you've got market expertise. So certainly, yes. Now, you've interviewed a lot of people in the course of your, I guess, your programs, but you also, as we spoke about earlier, made it a mission to speak to world leaders, right, or world thought leaders. Can you tell the audience listening why you decided to embark upon that, and maybe some of the key takeaways you've taken from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, it's good timing to answer this question because right now it's front of mind for me. And I don't know if we've chatted about this, but I have my latest book coming out in March. It's called The Book of Why and How. And the book in the section 2, this is why and I'll answer the question, and this is why it's forefront for me right now, is in section 2, it's called Thriving. Like I named each section. And in section 2 in Thriving, I reveal some of the common traits that I discovered. It's basically, I don't know, 80 pages of me revealing the stuff. So it's like you're getting, 5,000 hours of plus more than that 5,000 hours, but 5,000 hours of interviews of insight from some of the greatest thought leaders. And it was really significant to me to try to distribute it in multiple ways. So the book was one part of that, but it's front of mind because I'm just rereading. It sounds strange. I'm rereading my own book because I want to make sure as we're doing the launch that I'm, focused around what the book gives people and delivers to people. Even though, I've read it multiple times and I know it inside and out, you got to always be fresh. So point is that some of the key takeaways that I discovered in these interviews, one of the biggest ones, I think, there's some of these that people know but don't practice them, or they've heard but don't practice them. This one here, a lot of people haven't even heard, but I call it the power of no. And so what I've discovered is the highest of achievers say no. I don't know the number. I'd like to do a study on this, but it's probably like 5 times more, maybe 10 times more than the average person. Maybe even more than that. I don't know the numbers. I haven't crunched them yet, but I can tell you it's more. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you're trying to, a great example is you think Tony Robbins. If you try to call Tony Robbins right now on the phone to book him for something, you're not going to reach him. You're not going to speak to Tony Robbins. So that's automatically a no. But then his staff is probably set up and geared to say no to 9 out of 10 things that come their way that don't even reach Tony. So he's saying no, whether he's hired people to do it or not, more than the average person. And this is a challenge for me because I grew up in a small little town where I was taught to say yes to everything and then figure out how to do it later. And so for me, it was a big challenge to start saying no. But when I started studying the high achievers and realized how often they were saying no, I recognized that I need to start emulating them if I wanted to go further. And not only that, you start getting so busy that you realize you can't say yes to everything because everything you say yes to means a no to something else. And so it's first of all that they say no more. That's just the discovery. And then the second thing is how they say no. And so one, if they have the infrastructure to do it, then they might hire people to do it. When I interviewed Jack Canfield, I don't know the number of staff he has, but I interviewed him recently on site, and there were I'm going to say 10 people at the office then, but I'm going to guess if you take offsite people and volunteers, he probably has close to 100 people that are trying to help sort of say no so that only a few things reach Jack. And it's basically being able to say no to all the things that don't move the needle so you can say yes to the few that do. But in terms of the how, because I think this is just as important, I'll give you an example. The easiest way to give this example. But Chalene Johnson, who is she's kind of the Instagram mover and shaker, but she also created Turbo Jam, which was a highly popular fitness video, 6 million copies, I think, sold. And Chalene has really broke out into the social media world. She's got 2 top podcasts. And when I was interviewing her, I said, how do you juggle it all? And then she told me the story about how when she was first running the fitness centers, because before it was a video, She ran like, I forget what the number was, but say 100 locations across America. And so she had to figure out how to say no to all these things coming her way. And people would even say, can you take over for my class? And she felt guilty because it was her love and she wanted to say yes, but she started realizing she was too busy. So what she did was she started saying, okay, well, my family's really important to me. And if I say yes to everybody, I'm taking away time from my family. So her company was built around the family thing. So she started saying to people, look, I got to talk to my husband. I believe his name is Brett. So I got to talk to my husband and I have to see if we have something on the go at that time. So if we have something on the go, as you know, we're a family-oriented group and company, I'll have to say no. If I say no, I'll help find you somebody. I'll send you a link or connect you to somebody who can do it or help you with it. Or, you know, if you give me a couple days, I'll see if I might be able to do it. So let me talk to Brett and see what happens. Now, the great thing about this is if you're putting your family first, it's hard for anybody to get mad at you. And then secondly, it gives you time to think about it and decide, is this a yes or no? And then third, it's hard to get mad at somebody saying, but I will try to find somebody who can help you. Now, the one thing that happens a lot of times, I think she said it was a lion's share of the times, is that person is not mad at her, but they go find somebody else or they figure it out on their own anyway. And then even when she gets back and says, look, I can't do it, but I found somebody. Oh, don't worry about it. I've already got it figured out. But I like her way of saying no. But the point is you have to figure out, A, you have to understand that the awareness that people do say no more often if they're trying to get to that higher level. 2, or B, you have to know what a no and a yes is. And then 3, or C, you have to know how to say no and yes so you don't burn bridges. The middle one there, which I didn't explain, is the how do you decide what a no and yes is. For me, what I do is I have a mission statement or a purpose statement that I live by that basically says at all times I should be donating, motivating, inspiring, educating, or entertaining. That's my 5-point system. And so if somebody asks me to do something and it's 4 of those 5, it's probably the easiest yes I'll ever say. But if it's 1 of those 5 or less, or 2 or less, it's probably a fairly easy no. So that's how I basically decide this is a no or yes. And then the next stage is how do I tell them it's a no or yes. So that was a long answer to that, JP, but it's really it's really one of the most profound discoveries in these. Now I can work, in 2 more if you want, but I just want to share that one first because that's the one that most people don't realize.
Yeah, and for the other 2, are the other 2 sections of the book? Are those the other 2 that you described in the book?
No, so just that one section called Thriving, and the 3 sections of the book covers the 5 top things I've discovered.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, this is fascinating. Great stuff. I mean, for anybody listening, I mean, you're right there saying no or yes the right way and choosing what you need to say no to or yes to. Obviously, very, very powerful. So let's go through the other ones. I think it's really powerful stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to say, and these aren't necessarily in specific order. A lot of times I'll do it in specific order, but where I didn't know if we were covering 3, then I didn't put them in an order. But the next one, which is, I'll give you the probably, I'm going to say close order. The next one, which is probably the second most common trait. Now we've crunched all the numbers. Of course, it's always changing, but this next one I call lifelong learners or leaders. So the discovery is that lifelong learners are leaders, but I also say that lifelong learners are leaders. And that's that wording is specifically designed because we used to say that readers are leaders, but here's the problem with that one. It depends what they're reading. You can read 50 Shades of Grey all day, every day, but it might not help your business model or business.
Depends what kind of business you're in, but yeah, it probably doesn't. It probably doesn't move the needle.
That's why I said might not,
yeah.
because it could depend on the business. Yeah. But it depends on what you're reading. Then secondly, you could say leaders are readers, and that's true. But here's why I say lifelong learners are leaders now. First of all, it's the lifelong part. I've discovered that these people keep doing it until literally the day they die. They're still a student of the game. But the second part, learners are leaders, why it's significant now, and it wouldn't have necessarily been 25 years ago, is because we can learn in way more ways than reading now. For example, podcasting.
Exactly.
And I don't have to keep going on that, but we know there's all kinds of ways now. There's TED Talks we just talked about. And so the takeaway is that the people that dedicate themselves to lifelong learning are the ones that rise to and stay at the top. And to tell you how serious I feel about this, I'm currently reading 2 books right now. I pretty much always have 2 books on the go because I'm one of those people that if I didn't, I might get bored of the book. Even if I love it, I might tap out. So what I do is I'll bring 2 books that I feel are different styles of reading, usually a fiction and a nonfiction, but even the fiction will be a learning type. So for right now, for instance, I'm reading The 10th Insight and I'm reading The Magic of Thinking Big. Now, The Magic of Thinking Big is nonfiction. The fictional is The 10th Insight. And that book, for people that might not know that name, it's the follow-up book to The Celestine Prophecy, which was a mega best-selling book. And so I'm reading both of those right now. So I believe in this so much that I'm constantly reading. I watch TED Talks regularly. I got the latest success magazine over there in the office. I'm constantly learning. But to tell you how cool this is, the discovery, is the neat part is that this is not changed. This is not something that's a new phenomenon. And I didn't realize that. But here's where I discovered it. Sort of. I heard somebody say it one time and then I paid attention. But my girlfriend and I went to a place called Concord, Massachusetts. And Concord, for those that don't know, is the place where Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Louise May Alcott, who wrote The Little Women, the guy who wrote The Scarlet Letter, they were all like a commune of writers in the 1800s there that hung out together, almost like a mastermind, wrote together. And so we went there, and I had this discovery while I was there. We went to Ralph Waldo Emerson's library, from his home personal library. And I noticed that his personal library is bigger than the public library.
Wow.
And then I started thinking, that was the 1800s, and I started thinking all of the thought leaders of yesterday, even if they only finished grade 3, one of the common differentiators was that they all had personal libraries in their home. So these people, even though they didn't finish grade 3, like I say, a Henry Ford or Thomas Edison, still believed in the power of lifelong learning. And that was back in the day, 1800s, 1700s, what have you. If I come fast forward, Jack Canfield, who I referenced earlier, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul and Success Principles, Jack probably impacts 1 million people a year. And he was telling us the story about being at Tony Robbins' seminar. And, and this was like 5 years ago. And him and Tony are buddies. I mean, he could go backstage and just learn from Tony directly. And so I mentioned this story to somebody else that knew Jack, and they said, yeah. He said, one time I was at a Tony Robbins seminar. It's funny you say Tony Robbins. Jack was there, and he said, I was at the back of the room, and I saw this magical moment of this 19-year-old that was sitting there, like, working on his phone, doing stuff, not paying attention. He said, I look over, Jack's just a couple of feet over from him, taking notes like crazy, filling up a notebook. Guy who's at that point probably 67, 68. Let's say probably didn't need that knowledge as much as the 19-year-old. And the guy said it was crazy because the 19-year-old would look over at Jack every now and then and shake his head. And he thought, how crazy is it, the 19-year-old that needs that information more than Jack ever will, and yet he doesn't see the power of it. But Jack, who's almost 70, still taking notes. And to me, that sums up the power of lifelong learning. All of the icons that that have kind of raised the bar for other speakers, let's say, like the Zig Ziglars, Jim Rohns, Lisa Nichols, who I mentioned, Tony Robbins. These people still have coaches. They're still learning. Do we think that's a coincidence? I mean, why are they still learning? And then there's other people out there who need that information so much, and they're like, it's a waste of time. But they could stop. That's my point, is that they could say, Tony Robbins could say, I'm bringing in $500 million a year in revenue. I'm speaking to whatever number of million people a year. I might not need to keep learning. I maybe figured it out, and yet he's still doing it. There's not, to me, there's no surprise there. There's a secret that we need to be listening to.
That's right. It's the way he's put together. It's the way that thought leaders are put together. It's, the things that you've uncovered or seen as well in your own studying and interview of these people, which leads to their success, right? Or the success that others can emulate. So what are the things? That's great. I mean, you just given us, I guess, 2 right there, Corey. What's the, let's keep rolling here. This is good stuff. I think anybody listening is going to take value from this.
Well, I'll give you the third one, and it's kind of cool. It's not meant to be this way, but it really relates to the new book. So again, meaning I didn't plan to say, I'm going to segue into the new book, but it does really heavily relate. So the book is called The Book of Why and How. And why the how part is there is because when somebody finds their why, one of the things a lot of people don't know how to do is the next step. What do I do with this? What's the next game-changing stuff? Like we're talking about, how do I say no more? Things like that. Like you can discover your purpose, but then if you say yes to everything, you're going to get overwhelmed and maybe tap out. So the how part of the book is to teach you how to do it, but also what do you do with this knowledge once you have it? But going back to the first part of the book, which is the why, this relates heavily to the number one, and this, by the way, is the number one most common trait of the highest achievers I've interviewed. And I'm going to word it differently, but I'm going to say they live on purpose. And that wording is purposeful. So what I mean is they're living their purpose. They spend most of their day, I'm going to say upwards of probably 90% of their time and day, serving their why, their calling, what they were called here to do. So we'll call that your purpose as well. And I call it vitamin P. So I say they're fueled by vitamin P. It's the vitamin that you can't buy in the store, but the most important vitamin you'll ever take, which is to figure out what your purpose is. But to me, when I say your purpose, in the book, what I say is passion is what you do and purpose is why you do it. And your passion can change over and over. It can be a speaker, a lawyer, or an accountant. That stuff can change, but usually your purpose will stay the same. So to me, they're both encompassed in the why. And so in the book, that's why it was so important for me to reveal that and write a whole book about that, is because it's the number one thing I've discovered with the highest of achievers. Now, having said that, I didn't want to just write a book that all it taught you was how to find your why, because then I felt that's only serving the audience that hasn't figured it out yet. But I still want to serve the people that have found their why, but they're not using it properly. So, but to answer the bigger question, JP, living on purpose, that if somebody could figure out, I'll put it this way. I've heard numbers as dismal as only 5% of people will discover their purpose or their calling or their why in their lifetime. So imagine if that is the case. Imagine if we could somehow increase that to 8% or 10%. Like what could we do if you consider everything we've been able to do as a society with only 5% or whatever that number is? And so that's a part of my calling, is to help more people find their calling.
Find their calling. That's great. So I have the sense that you have found your calling. How do you coach others, or how do you tell other people what they need to do in order to find their purpose?
Yeah, so absolutely. And one of the things I always hate is when, I shouldn't say hate, hate's a strong word. I don't really hate anything. But one of the things that I always like, oh, why would you do that, is when you bring somebody on for an interview and then they say, it's all in my book. So hopefully you can see that I'm willing to share anything that's in the book, because I still feel a person, the more they hear, they go, well, I want to know what else is in the book. Yeah. But having said that, I bring this up because I'm going to share with you really quickly one of the exercises I offer in the book that could be for some people a monumental exercise. So it's a core part of the book, but rather than be that guy that says, oh, it's in my book, here's the exercise in a matter of 1 minute that in the book probably equates to maybe 20 minutes, and actually trying it might take you some time. But I'll tell you the quick version of the exercise. I'm going to give you the short nuts and bolts. But basically what I take people through to figure out what their calling might be, I think for you to find your purpose, a lot of times you have to use the gateway of your passion first. So you have to figure out what you want to do before you can figure out why you're doing it. And so what I tell people is to start making a list. And some variation of this people have heard before, but I don't know that they've done the exercise. But make a list of the things that you would do if money wasn't an issue. If you won the lottery today, sure, you might say you're going to go to the beach and never work again. But after a month, you'll be bored and you'll come back and work. So what you need to know is, what would you do now that you don't need to do it for money? Then I want you, and so this is one list, I want you to also say, what did I love doing when I was a kid, when money was an issue? You could also maybe put in there, if I planned to do something like go to clown college and somebody pushed me off track, what was in clown college that I wanted to do? Go back to that intersect and say, what did I want to do when they convinced me not to? Now, it might not be clown college, but you might have wanted to be an entertainer. Maybe you want to be a speaker, or whatever that looked like. I also want people to ask, what am I good at? What do people say I'm good at? What will I, when I do it, does time stand still so I don't watch the clock? And so what you're doing is you're putting all those things on a list. And you might have random things like photography on that list, cooking, playing guitar, speaking, doing stand-up comedy. It might be all over the place. Now what I want you to do is rate them in order. So what is the one that's the biggest priority? If you were to stop doing it today, you would be unhappy or miserable. And so what I want, and then in order, I want you to go through them in order. So let's say at the top of the one you found photography, just to give a random example. And it might not be that specific to a career, but I'm just using that example. But let's say you say photography. That's the one I really dig. Then what I want you to do is start now making a list of what are the things you would have to do to start doing photography. And whether that, by the way, doesn't have to be to make money full time. I always say to people, if you're trying to find the passion that's going to pay the bills immediately, then it's not your passion. You're following the wrong steps. You need to find out what you love doing, as I said, because money is not an issue. Do it on the side if you have to of your career, and maybe it'll become your career, or maybe you don't even care if it does because you don't want to poison it with money, whatever that looks like to you. But the point is, let's say it was photography. Then what I want you to do is figure out what are the small steps, because photography is an easier one. Most people might not have that as a fear, but let's say it was stand-up comedy. You're probably going to have a fear of getting on a stage. You're probably not going to say, okay, I know it's stand-up now, I'm just going to jump on a stage. So what you need to figure out are what are the small steps. So if we use photography, maybe it means buying some of the best-selling books on photography. Maybe it means taking out 3 or 4 photographers for lunch. Maybe it means taking a local community college photography course. Maybe it means going out and taking pictures outside in the morning and not showing them anybody until you're comfortable doing it. And so you figure out these baby steps and you start taking action on them. And then the next part is, each time you achieve that baby step, you achieve a success there, then you reward yourself with something. because you'll love the idea that you got a reward for something that didn't feel that hard to do. And so you're going to want to take the next step again to get the next reward. And you're using that dangling carrot. And then when you get to the final big step, it doesn't seem like a big step anymore because you built up all this confidence doing the smaller steps. So that's the exercise in a nutshell. I usually add in for people to figure out which ones are inside and outside their comfort zone, because that's a whole other variable. But that's another part to it. And then the newest thing I'm adding in now is synchronicity, because I'm doing some work around synchronicity. So basically, an author I'm working with calls them meaningful coincidences, the idea of synchronicity. So if people are wondering what a synchronicity is, for me, it's a meaningful event that happens that would seem like a coincidence, but it feels like there's no way it could be a coincidence. And so why I add this in now is because that's another variable. People will say, well, I started with photography, but I decided I don't like photography. Yeah, but by starting with photography, A, you're doing something you thought you loved anyway, so it's not really wasting your time. But B, are you listening to those little things that say, maybe you went out, and I'll give you an example, but maybe you went out to take a picture of somebody. Let's use this example. You went to take a picture, some photos of a musician, and you are hanging out with the musician, you're chatting them up, and you realize at some point here you don't like photography, but by chatting with the musician, you realize that you have a lot of great ideas around music. You've been obsessed with music your whole life. And then they reach out to you a month later or a week later and say, you have some good ideas. We're looking for a manager. I know you probably haven't done that, but is that something you might like to explore? What I'm getting at is by doing the photography, it opened up the door for the synchronicity of the music side. And by taking on that project with the musician, you opened up the door. So what I guess I'm saying is explore what you might be good at, but also listen to the little things that may take you off path, because maybe there's a clue there as well. So that, I guess I said 1 minute, that was probably 3 minutes, but that's a 3-minute class on what I share with people in terms of how to at least adventure towards their passion and their purpose.
Crash course, Corey. It's fantastic. In 3 minutes, I think you're identifying some really key principles for people. And to add to what you just said, it's in part the journey as well, right? So as you say, going from photography to perhaps band management, if you're listening and being thoughtful all the way through, you may discover things along the way that make the journey really interesting. And that's a big part of the point here, isn't it? Living life in a way that is fulfilling. And in doing that, you're probably going to bring it back to others as well. You're going to give to others. They're going to seek and maybe gain the same way themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, and when I talk about, again, your why can change, I mentioned the mission statement that helps me say yes and no. And a lot of people used to think that was my why, to be donating, to motivate. And it's within there. But to me, for me, because those are still how-tos, right? Like the entertaining could be doing stand-up comedy, or it could be entertaining when I'm keynoting an event. But for me, my bigger why, just to kind of put that there for people, that's my mission statement is a part of it, because it helps me figure out what I get excited about, what resonates with me. But the bigger piece is I essentially want to create a positive ripple for people. And I'm not too biased in terms of how that happens. So, for example, that could be helping. When I used to do stand-up, it could be helping you escape the crap of your day by coming out and laughing at one joke of mine, even if the rest all bombs. But then the next night, or next event, I could be speaking for somebody, and I'm educating them. And so I'm creating a positive ripple for their staff, let's say, because now I share with their staff about the power of saying no. And all of a sudden, not that they then hopefully say no to their managers all the time because they say, Corey said you should do it. But maybe it means that some of their staff aren't overwhelmed anymore. Maybe I'm talking to all the leaders, and a lot of their leaders say yes to everything, you get bogged down. Maybe that's an eye opener for them. So that's how I'm doing it for them. Then maybe for another person, with our Blue Talks, we tied in that any person that attends the event, we buy a food item and donate it to charity. So maybe the positive ripple is for the charity and the person that basically gets that meal for today. But also, I'll give you an example. We did an event where we went in to donate the food. We brought our son in, and we acted like we videoed him as like he was the one doing the donation. And the lady working there, my son, were chatting it up, and we started talking to her. And when we left, she said, "Thank you for brightening my day." So we're going in hopefully to impact lives with the food side, but the positive ripple could be for that lady who needed that in her day after somebody was just yelling at her. So for me, the positive ripple, regardless of how it happens, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, one at a time, right? And you're not even sure where the ripple effect will be felt, but that in so doing, there will be something that a positive result as a consequence thereof. You relate a lot back to your mission statement, your personal creed. Can you tell us how you worked yourself through that? And I'm going to assume again that it's probably something that you coach people or suggest that they ought to have in their own life as well, right?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the catalyst for me was that I started recognizing, again, I'm obviously I'm an analytical, let's study people and see what the best of the best do.
Yeah, very thoughtful approach to how things are occurring, right? You sit back and I can tell you observe, and then you are also very effective at communicating what you've observed.
Well, I'll tell you, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, was the second book I ever read in my life. First one, when you say second, you always have to say what the first one is. The first one I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. So, I mean, I read two classics that were both written in 1937. There's probably synchronicity there. Like, what are the odds of reading two books that are monumental that, and I didn't know anything about any books. So it just happened that I read How to Win Friends and I said it to somebody and they're like, you know what you need to read now then? But How to Win Friends, I didn't read till I was 27, by the way. First book I read cover to cover, and now, like I said, I'm reading two books right now at one time. So that book changed everything. So when people say, what book do you recommend? I always go to How to Win Friends first. But Think and Grow Rich, what it did for me is it introduced me to Napoleon Hill's way of thinking, which was to study people and to basically, if you read Think and Grow Rich, he doesn't even mention himself, or he says the author. As he's talking about himself, he says the author. So I really resonated with the idea that he wasn't trying to get any of the credit. He was just trying to share, here's what I discovered. And so I kind of took a bit of both paths, because I took the Napoleon Hill path of learning from others and sharing those details. And then at the same time, I also took a different path, which was the idea of me wanting to be a little bit front and center. Not being about me, but recognizing that if I wanted to jump on a stage, I need to share the message far and wide. Now, Napoleon Hill did that later in his life as a lecturer, but early on, he was just the researcher for 25 years. Well, I wanted to be the researcher and the lecturer.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where it all started for me. But yeah, I study people and study things and try to figure out what are sort of the common elements and traits. And one of the things I noticed is the top companies, the thing that they had in common is they all had a powerful mission statement that in most cases their staff even knew. And by the way, their staff might not know the wording, but they understood the premise behind it. So the great classic example would be Disney. Whereas Walt Disney, when he started out, his mission statement was to make people, especially children, happy. All these years later, the creed or mission is still, to a large degree, to make people happy. All they did was subtract the children because they realized the adults going there can be happy too. And the happier they are, the more they're going to spend money on the children and go back. So point of the story is I recognize these companies, to go back to your question about how did I come up with the mission statement? I recognize all these companies had a mission statement and I didn't. And I'm like, well, if it works for companies, why can't it be personal too? And so that was the catalyst for me. It was just studying and going, the top companies, what do they have in common? The Apples, the Disneys, the staff are implementing the mission statement even if they don't know the wording of it. And so that's what got me to do it. In terms of the what mine was, like the donate, the motivate, what I did was I looked and said, what are the things that jazz me up and what do they all have in common? And so I recognized that even the donate maybe implies giveaway for free. But even when I'm doing a talk that I'm getting paid for, because I still do, I said I don't do no fee talks, but we're going to incorporate it again. I used to do it a lot where I do one a month, like a school or something where they don't have any budget. But my point is, even when I'm getting paid to do it, I'm still giving. I'm still giving to that audience. The audience didn't pay me. Their company maybe did. And indirectly they did because they're working for the company. But you get what I mean. I'm still going above and beyond. I'm not just going there to get the paycheck from the top. So to me, I figured out I was donating anyway. Then the entertaining, well, that came in. I did it stand-up. I love the entertaining side. Well, why can't I bring that over into speaking? Why can't I also entertain you? Because I learned that if I can entertain you, I'll keep your attention. So long story short, that's how I came up with mine. I just dissected and said, what are the things that I'm doing at all times? Because to me, a mission statement was like, we want to be the company that helps our community. Like it was always about an action thing. So I said, what are the action things and what I'm doing? And then to finish this, yeah, I do get other people to do a mission statement. If I do a workshop, some of my go-tos are I'll get people to usually I'll get separate groups. One group to do surrounding yourself with exercise. That's a whole different story. But whenever I was struggling emotionally, I battled anxiety. I recognized that there was a great quote that said, the only difference between the you of today and the you of 5 years' time will be the books that you read and the people that you meet. And so I had to start dissecting, saying, who am I hanging around with? What am I reading? And I recognized that who I was hanging around with was the problem by doing an exercise where I just basically put people on a list and said, left side, negatives, right side, positive, who's bringing positive energy versus toxic, and then add them up. And you have to make changes, obviously, if you have more negative people in your life than positive. So I get people to do that exercise in one group. Another exercise I do is finding your purpose, which is a pretty big exercise. You got 15 minutes, go. People spend their whole life. You got 15 minutes. Yeah. But the third one, I just did this recently. That's why I'm speaking in this term, meaning this is the exercise I did. The third one was the one you asked about, which is how to identify your mission statement. and I want to share this with you to tell you how powerful it can be, but that anybody can figure it out, is I was working with this group of stylists, hairstylists in a rural community. And I said, I want you guys to come up with a mission statement. And they basically work together. Now this is, their probably average age in that group was probably 18 at most. And they worked together for 15 minutes. And I shared mine, and I shared with them that my girlfriend has one, which is an acronym. She uses SMILE, and she has, be social, motivating, loving, that type of thing. And so I did share that. But this group of stylists, they all worked with one girl. They picked one girl and said, we're going to develop your mission statement. And at the end, I said, did you guys come up with a mission statement? She said, we sure have. I said, oh, okay, well, tell me all about it. And she said, I want to be calm. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And she said, for every person that sits in my chair that I'm cutting their hair, I want to be comforting, approachable, loving, and motivating. And I said immediately to them in the room, and I've said it many times since, if a hairstylist does those 4 things, truly does them, and you're in the chair getting a haircut with her, my experience is it's a very rare day that you'll ever go to another hairstylist in your life.
That's right.
And it's also very rare that girl won't be employable everywhere in the world. Yeah. So my point is, 18-year-old stylists came up with that acronym and also mission statement for her that she said she was going to live by and put in her wallet or purse. That's the power of this, JP. But yeah, so I recommend people do it and try to guide them through, because I think it can be life-changing if you know what you stand for. And I think the mission statement really at the end of the day is or leads towards what your purpose is, and that's everything.
Yeah, it really is everything. I want to see if we can turn that to perhaps listeners of the Millionaires Lawyer. So for a business person that's growing their business right now, with possibly a view to selling it someday, multiple figures, a lot of the things we've talked about here would be really key for anybody's personal success. And obviously a lot of these things translate to business success as well. Can you give us a couple of, or I guess, we even talked about how Apple or these companies have the same kind of mission statements, but can you give us a couple of ideas for a business owner and how they might apply the same types of principles to their own business?
Yeah, well, I think that one we can start right there, which is the mission statement, is I'm going to say it this way, most small companies that I worked with and studied, I would say most, it's very general, but a lot of don't even have a mission statement. Yeah. And if they do, it's so big and wordy and cumbersome, they don't know what it stands for. They don't understand it themselves. So the first thing I would say, and I wish every company would go through this exercise, and sooner rather than later, is to figure out what is your mission? What is your purpose as a company? If you look at Starbucks, like Starbucks as the company that was trying to give back to, for communities, but also rich farming, wanting to reward these farmers and I'll say give back in the sense that we're making quality product, we're giving money back to communities, and then the other side is, and for you as the customers helping us do that, we want to be your office in between home and work. So even customers know that. Like I talk to people who have never worked at Starbucks that know that Starbucks is considered the middle office. I mean, so they've dialed it in so well that the customers know it. Apple, you think back to their 1984 video, that the commercial they did, where the idea was that they didn't want to be Big Brother like they considered IBM, and let's be the company, the little engine that could, and we're going to change the world by putting a computer on every person's desktop. Customers knew that. And so customers knew that they didn't want to deal with the big company. That was like, I'm saying the Apple fans didn't want to deal with the big company. The big companies, they want to deal with the company's going to change the world, which is kind of ironic now that Apple's the big company.
It is the big company, yeah, exactly.
But you get my point, though. But having said that, when it comes to Apple, for instance, customers know that, well, I shouldn't say customers know, but people have recognized that Apple sells their why. So what is their why? They want to be the company that changes the world. You're buying a different kind of company. You're a part of a crew. I won't say cult, but you're a part of a crew. But think about it. That's the reason why, go back to Starbucks. If you go into any Starbucks in the world right now with a Dell computer and say, I'll trade you my Dell for your Apple straight up, there's not many Apple fans in the world that would ever do that. And why is that? Well, Dell sells the what? A low-priced, effective computer. Apple sells the why, a computer that's going to help change the world. And everybody wants to be in the why side. Harley Davidson, the day their stock changes, when they realize what they do, and this is in their words by an executive, we sell the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to drive around in a Harley in a city where nobody knows them and be terrified of them. They sell a lifestyle.
A
And so that's
lifestyle,
why,
exactly.
my point out of all this, JP, is why wouldn't the little companies who could do this easier and are more nimble, why wouldn't all, and again, we're talking, I don't say at little, small and medium-sized business that are trying to scale, as you said, why wouldn't they all at least figure out what's our why and what makes us different? So this kind of dials into two things we talked about. A, I would go back and figure out what's your why, your purpose as a company. Don't just go out there saying we're gonna start a business to make money. What is your why? And then the second part is, and in a perfect world, if you're already running, do it with your staff. Figure out what is our mission statement. Why do people stay working here? And the worst part we don't want to hear is why do people leave?
Right.
And so that's what I would recommend people do. And I hate to say this, but it's true. There's an airline, and I think I'm implying it, but without saying it, there's an airline in Canada that used to be the little engine that could, that everybody loved. And now I hear, sadly, a lot of people that fly with them saying they're just like the other big one. And that company, how they built so well is by saying, and this will tell you almost who it is, but we're owners. We're in it together. And so I think they need to, if they're not there now, and I'm going to say this is what I hear, if they're not there now, they need to get back to that route. Because that's why you would hear potential employees say, I applied, I'm on my 4th interview now, and I think I'm going to get it. And, people would wait for a year working another job, hoping to get a job there. So if you could have that in your company, then think about what that's going to do for your employees, for your stock, for your customers. So that's one of my biggest takeaways, is to figure out what your purpose is, figure out your mission statement, and build your company around that. And then I would also say, from a customer service perspective, make sure the customer is number 2. And that's going to be very counterintuitive to what you would expect me to say. There's a great book by that title, so I'm lifting that title off somebody else. But the gist of it is, if you treat your employees like your customers, if you treat them like they're number 1, if you treat them like gold, they'll take care of the customer.
Right.
And so I would say, as a business owner, if you're listening, that's another big thing, is treat your customers like they're number 2, treat your employees like you're number 1, and that they're your core customer. And then your end customer will become number 1, maybe even higher, because then you have 100 employees going to treat them like that, rather than you trying to convince employees to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually really good to do. Yeah, so treat employees like number 2, employees like number 1 for the business owner, and the employees will treat the customers, the clients, as number 1. That's great. That's great stuff. With the company you mentioned, I think there's one of the shifts that's occurring right now is there's been an offer to purchase. Onyx has offered to purchase the company, so the stock price is up. We'll see if it's actually accepted by the employees. If not, it may be continue to be an employee-owned company, but if not, as I say, it will very much become just like all the other companies owned by a corporate shareholder. So we'll see what happens with that one. Now, that sort of brings me to a spot, and I just have more questions for us here, but where are we going with all this, Corey? Like, we talk podcasting, we talk, everybody's got online courses. There's so much media to be consumed now. There's so much information available. What does the next version of all this look like for the consumer, for humanity, really? Do you have any ideas? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a good question, because on one hand, there's a double-edged sword right now, because everybody, as you said, can be their own media. Like, literally, I have my bio that I was reading it the other day from from when I wrote it from an earlier book years ago, and says, about me, I'm only talking like 5 years ago, that he has his own media entity, or I can't remember the wording. And it was true. Like, I had our podcast. We had 3 podcasts. I had a book series, a newspaper. Like, I literally had what you consider a media entity. And it wasn't a stretch. But now it's not a stretch to say that every one of us truly can be our own media. People are going to our page and seeing what we say and say, oh, I didn't realize that was happening. So we're actually the media now. So that's good and bad. So let's say why it's good is it means now, if we talk business-wise, we have more access to our consumer than ever before. There's not as many, obstacles between communicating with our consumer. We had a musician on one time, and he was like signed to the big record label years ago. And then I said, how does it feel now? Like, he started out going to local record stores and handing out his CD to put them on consignment. And then he gets signed by a big record label and doesn't even think about that ever again. And then all of a sudden, here we are, he's tail end of his career, and he's now going to record stores and putting his CDs on consignment. I said, how does that feel to you? Because there's one side you can see how that's liberating, but there's also a side where you can see where it's like almost like let's call it like people going, oh, well, he took a step backwards, and almost like humiliating or something. He said, no, I have more direct access to my consumers than ever before, and that's why I started this in the first place. He said, I love the fact that if I have a new song, I can get it out to my consumers immediately rather than waiting for the record company to decide if they're going to put it out and put money behind it. So the good of that is that, JP, we can grow a business from nothing with no money and get it out to people. Now let's go to the negative and be honest about it. There's more competitors than ever before. So, just like we talked TEDx Talks earlier, there's more TEDx Talks than ever before, so there's less chance your TEDx Talk's going to go viral. Much the same, now if you can go on Good Morning America and maybe not reach as many people as if you go on the Lewis Howe show, and that's good and bad, because again, it means now we're all competing. There's so many options for consumers. It's really hard now to build what I'm going to call a bigger brand, because how do you get those eyeballs away from all these other people that are doing a great job and fighting for the same eyeballs? So where do I see it going from there? I see it going, the downside of this too is that in podcasting, and we're seeing it, a lot of the bigger companies now are investing in podcasting because they want a piece of what the little guys were getting. So now all of a sudden you're seeing the top rated shows again going back to the big companies. Like NPR dominates podcasting, as you know, and I'm sure you'll probably see at some point the Coca-Cola podcast.
Yeah,
and they can put money and their name behind that immediately and start growing right away. So I think what's happening is the little guys have a chance to compete with the big guys, and the big guys want to make sure that they don't lose out to the little guys. So you're seeing more competitiveness of that. What I think we have to do, if we're talking about what the future looks like, and this is all, of course, crystal ball stuff, but I think what we have to do is we have to figure out, this is where I think this can go, is we have to figure out authentically where we belong. So what I mean by that is, so many people now are going, okay, I need to have a podcast because everybody says I have to have a podcast. I need to be in a book because I have to write a book, everybody says. I need to be on video because people say I need to be on video, but I need to also have audio. And so I think people need to figure out, what are you good at? What's your passion area? What do you love? And go all in on that. And let's say, for example, because none of us know what next platform is going to be big, but let's say it was, Snapchat, or let's say the next thing is going to be called Squirrel. Just, and of course it won't be the proper spelling of squirrel. But let's say that was going to be it. Then we have to figure out what we're good at. And then anytime a platform comes out like the one we're good at, let's say Squirrel's good at video, and let's say we loved YouTube and YouTube's going, not doing as well, then we can transition to Squirrel easily. So I think this is not necessarily where it's going, but I think where we need to go with this, instead of trying to be all things to everybody and everywhere at once, what we need to do is figure out which ones we're good at. And then when the platform that's next comes out for that one, you can jump on there and be good right away. And ideally, you can have a way. So this is another side, is whether it's email or however you're going to build your followership, you need to figure out how to do that so that when, let's say, YouTube wasn't as big and Squirrel is bigger, then you now can take your fans over there. So my two part to that is, how do we fit it within this, is I think we need to figure out where we're good. And then if we can build people loving us there, like, what was it called? The one that was the first one that was like the 6-second video. I forget what it was called now. Vine.
Oh, right.
Vine, it's easier for you to bring people over to YouTube because you're good on video. So that's what I think people need to do, because here's the flip side to answer your bigger question is, I think for the next short term, at least, it's just going to be more of the same. We're going to have more eyeballs going on to places. There are going to be more social platforms. There's going to be more hype about which one's bigger. It might even cannibalize itself to the point where now we have the big Facebook and Instagram. Sadly, I think there could be a point where it's just pockets of big. And I say sadly because, then it's going to be even more challenging, because then we're going to have like maybe Squirrel and maybe Dodgeball, and we have all these different ones. And so all of a sudden now there's no big one. And so then you're just all over the place saying, I got to be everywhere. So I think if you can have the mindset, even with just the big ones, that I'm good with writing, so I should be on Facebook writing and maybe put an image every now and then. I should be on Instagram, but make sure my Instagram thing has a lot of writing rather than a photo. It obviously has to have a photo to publish it, but have a photo, but make the writing the central focus. LinkedIn, same thing. Twitter, same thing. But if you're a video guy, then maybe you go on Instagram and do the video stuff. Maybe you do Facebook Lives. That answer the question, because I'm really... I'm just speculating as to, I don't think it's going to change quickly to be where it's, there's a new identity that's taken over social media. I think social media is here to stay. But I think what's probably going to happen more than anything is you're not going to see the big giants anymore. You're going to see at some point pockets of stuff where it has like 500,000 rather than 1 billion.
Yeah. Actually, you did a great job of answering that question. I've asked it a number of times on this show and other formats, and people are having trouble answering that question. But I think you just gave a great one. It's more of the same as what I hear you saying, but also understanding where you're good at it and being able to leverage whatever the latest is by doing what you're good at on it. Now, with that, tell us how, I mean, you're clearly good at what you do. Tell us how we can find you on your platforms, Corey.
I'm going to give you the easy answer because I think I mean, we're in a world now again where everybody says, find me here, find me here, find me there, find me here. And I'll have people on the show and they'll say, find me on Instagram under this. And they have different handles for each one. So then they list like the 4 big ones they're on and plus their website. So I'm going to make it easier than that. JP, I'm just going to say 2 places. One is my main website, and it's easy to remember, thatspeakerguy.com. I try to keep everything simple, so that's speakerguy.com. So if you go there, then you're going to find all the social channels. So just go there, and if you want to connect with me on the one that you love, the one you're good at, connect on that one. And then also on there, you'll find my TEDx talks, articles for Entrepreneur and Forbes and stuff like that. That's all there. My bio's there. How to work with me is there. The second part I would say is I always like to give a giveaway. So the other option is you can grab a free copy of the book I wrote called The Book of Public Speaking. So we didn't talk a lot about speaking, we did early on, but for those that want to be influencers, and I'll say influencers because the book reveals a lot of stuff that you can relate to Facebook Lives, to video, to even written form. As long as you read between the lines, or if you want to be a speaker, it's all there. And but I want to give that book, the digital version, away for free. So again, thebookofpublicspeaking.com, because I like to make the websites easy. Go there, you can grab a free copy of the book. And something I'm starting to do now is if people want to work with me, what we're doing now is a 15-minute intake type strategy call. So if people want to take advantage of that, when you go and connect with me on the Book of Public Speaking, when you grab the free book, or if you reach out to me through thatspeakerguy.com, we'll message out to you and see if that's something you're interested in. But I've never done that before. So I don't do any one-on-one coaching, but now we're doing intake sessions for people who may be interested in being in our speaking program or one of the other things we're doing. So that's a newbie as well. But again, to make it easy for everybody, the bookofpublicspeaking.com, that's speakerguy.com.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, easy is good, especially as people are driving or wherever they may be listening to this podcast. So I appreciate that as well. And so please do reach out to Corey. You can hear he's got a wealth of knowledge in a lot of these different areas. A lot of real great stuff here today, Corey. I like to end these podcasts. I'm going to challenge you again because you provided us with actually a lot of great things. Differentiating, saying no to yes. And lifelong learning, right? We talked about that, and living on purpose. Now, with those things, and being part of your book. But I want you to leave the listeners with one thing to take them through the rest of this day. As they've listened to this podcast, one thing that they can take with them, maybe the ripple effect we talked about, or something that will add to their day and for those around them. Can you leave us with one thing as we say goodbye?
Yeah, I would say you don't realize how desperately somebody in the world, I don't know who they are, but somebody in the world is praying to hear your story or your message. So whether you're a business owner and it's your message within your business, whether it's personal and your message, what I would say is rather than me say, here's what you should take away, I'm a big believer if you give, you're going to get back tenfold. So what I would say is whatever social channel you're on, I'm going to assume most of us are on a social channel. If you're not, I'll give you a second option. But if you're whatever social channel you're on, what I would say is go post something, whether it's your story that you haven't shared before. But, I always say the things that we're most embarrassed to share is the things other people need to hear the most. So maybe it's you digging deep and saying, here was a game-changing moment in my life. Hopefully it serves you. Whether you say, here's the one thing I do that's made the difference in my career or business, but share something with somebody else. So share something, post something for somebody else. You don't even know who. There might only be one person that reads it that actually it makes a difference for. You might have 3 likes, but it might be 50 people that read it, and it might impact them. But go do that, because then you're giving to somebody else. You're creating the ripple for somebody else. But I would say if you're not on social media, again, I know it's going to be the minority, but I don't want to leave anybody out. Then maybe it just means you text. If you do texting, if you don't pick up the phone and call somebody and tell them why they matter to you. And it's not easy to do, but things like this were game changers for me. The day I didn't tell my mother I loved her almost my whole life. And then I had these trifecta of deaths that impacted my life. And I did a talk on it called Living Your Own Bucket List. But I realized one thing on that I didn't put on my bucket list that I should have was saying, tell my mother I loved her before I died. And so I started doing it. And since that point, we pretty much always say, I love you. And that was 5 years ago. And it's changed everything. So it may not be easy. You don't have to tell the person you love them if that's not your comfort zone. But even just picking up the phone and saying, you're awesome. Just wanted to tell you. So my answer to that, JP, is do something for somebody else. But those are hopefully the patterns or paths of how you can do that.
Oh, that's great stuff, Corey. Really appreciate that. And I got to tell you, you're awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for being on the Millionaires Lure today. I look forward to the next time we get a chance to connect.
Thank you, JP, and the feeling's 100% mutual. Thanks for all the good work you're doing.
Cheers.